Okay, so today we are going to talk about two-way tables. And so what a two-way table is it's a table that displays two categories of data collected from the same source. So from the same source, it's talking about like the same sample, the same population. So this is, if I were to survey our class and I asked you two questions, that would be, I'd be getting the information from the same source. I'd be getting my answers from you guys. Okay. So if we look at this, it says the table below shows the result from a survey where students were asked if they play an instrument and if they play a sport. Find the sum of each row and column, then answer the questions that follow. So what we're going to do is I want to know how many students play an instrument. So if I'm figuring out the rows, I'm answering these questions. So in order to figure out how many students play an instrument, I take 9 plus 14, and that's going to get me 23. So this answer is from 9 plus 14. Then I want to know how many students don't play an instrument. So I'm going to take 33 plus 19, and I'm going to get a total amount of 52 students don't play an instrument. Okay. Now we're going to see how many students play in a sport. So I'm going to take 9 plus 33, and that's going to get me 42. How many students don't play in a sport? 14 plus 19 is going to get me 33. And then I want to know how many total students did I survey. So I should be able to take 23 plus 52 and 42 plus 33 and get the same answer. Total, we surveyed 75 students. So now that we know some totals, what we're going to do is we're going to figure out some of these questions. So it says, how many students play an instrument? So if I look at my total, how many students do we know play an instrument? 23. Because I go to the plays an instrument and I look at my total, which is 23. How many students play an instrument though and a sport? So I go plays an instrument, and then I go to the plays a sport. That'd be 9 students. So 9 students do both. Now I want to know how many students do not play in a sport. 33, because I go does not play a sport, and I look on the bottom, and that's a total of 33. How many students play a sport but not an instrument? So I want to know plays a sport. This one plays an instrument. This one does not play an instrument. So that would be 33. Because they don't play an instrument, but they play a sport. And then how many total students were surveyed? 75. Good. So this is just following the columns, matching them up. Which one goes with which? Which one answers my question? Which one applies to my question? Different things like that. Now, before we get into a completely blank table, do we have any questions? Okay, then we're going to move on down and we're going to look at our question here. So it says, Sydney randomly surveyed students at her school and found that 72 students ride the school bus and 37 of those students buy lunch from the cafeteria. There are 19 students that do not ride the bus but buy lunch from the cafeteria. 9 students do not ride the bus or buy lunch from the cafeteria. So, we have to go through all of this information they just gave us and figure out where do they go. So, I know that there are 72 students who ride the bus. So, where is this 72 going to go? At the bottom of rides the bus, because there's 72 students total who ride the bus. And then it says, and 37 of those, so 37 of these 72 buy lunch from the cafeteria. So where would that 37 go? Good. Rides the bus and buys lunch. Well, I want to know then how many don't buy lunch from the cafeteria? How would I figure that out? Good. 72 minus 37. So how many students don't buy lunch but ride the bus? 35. Now it says there are 19 students who do not ride the bus. So where does that go? 19 students who do not ride the bus, but then it says, but they do buy lunch from the cafeteria. Good. Doesn't ride the bus and buys lunch. So 19 would go right here. Then it tells me 9 students do not ride the bus or buy lunch from the school. That'd be my last one right here. Doesn't ride the bus and does not buy lunch. Well, that's the only numbers that they give me. I want to know my totals now. I fill in all those spaces. How many students do not ride the bus? 28. How many students buy lunch from the school? And how many students do not buy lunch from the school? 44. And then, how many students total did she survey? 100. So, I want to know how many students buy their lunch? How many students buy their lunch? 56. How many students ride the bus but do not buy their lunch? 35. How many students do not ride the bus? How many students do not buy their lunch? And then how many students were surveyed? 100. Okay, do we have any questions about this front example here? Okay, flip it on over then. And now we have one that is partially filled in, partially not filled in. So it says, Adam surveyed 120 random students in his middle school and asked them if they plan to attend the school musical. Of the 80 students who responded that they are attending the musical, 15 are 7th graders. Of the 40 6th graders students surveyed, 13 said they do not plan on going. Only 10 8th graders surveyed do not plan on attending the musical. So all of that information they just gave us, they already filled in. So now I need to fill in these missing pieces. So how would I figure out how many 6th graders are going? Good. So I'm going to take 40 minus 13. And that's going to give me 27 sixth graders are going. Then, how would I figure out how many eighth graders are going? Actually, no, let's do this a different way. How do I figure out how many eighth graders were surveyed? Oh, no, wait. Okay, which one do I want to do? Which one do I know more information? Oh, here we go. This one I know more information about. Not going to the musical. I can figure out how many seventh graders are not going. How would I do that? I'm going to take 40 minus, what's 13 plus 10? 23. So I can add the two together that I know and subtract them off of my total. So how many seventh graders are not going? 17. Which now that's going to help me figure out my total. How many seventh graders were surveyed? 32. Well, now that can help me figure out how many eighth graders were totaled, because I know there was 120 people surveyed. So I'm going to take 120, and what am I going to do with that? Subtract off 40 and 32. So I'm going to take 120 minus 72. This 72 is 40 plus 32. And how many eighth graders were surveyed? 48 here. So if I take 40 plus 32 plus 48, I'm going to get 120. Okay? So then finally, how would I figure out how many eighth graders are going to the musical? Good. I'm going to take 48, because that's the total, minus 10. Okay, and how many eighth graders are going to the musical? 38. Good. You could have done it this other way where you added these two together and subtract them off of 80. That works as well. So there's always more than one way to solve something. Now I want to know how many eighth graders plan to attend the musical? How many seventh graders were surveyed? And how many sixth graders plan to attend the musical? There we go. Questions on when there's missing pieces? So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about relative frequency. Relative frequency is the values in each category divided by the total number of values. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take each number in each of these categories, because I'm going to do this from the question from number 3. I'm going to find the relative frequencies of these now. So I want to know what percent of sixth graders are going to the musical. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take 27 and divide that by 120. Because that's how many total people I asked. So we're going to take the value in each of these columns and divide it by 120. Okay, so that should get you 0.225. We're going to round that up to 0.23. And you leave these as decimals because we will change them into percents. So how am I going to figure out what percent of 6th graders are or 7th graders are going? 15 divided by 120. And you're going to get 0.125, so we're going to round that to 0.13. And how do I figure out how many 8th graders are going? 38 divided by 120. And that's going to get me 0.31 with the 6 repeating. So I'm going to round that to 3.2. Now you can do this 2 ways. You can add these all up and see what it gets you. Or I can just take 80 divided by 120. And that's going to get me 0.68. So you can either add them up or just divide that as well. So I'm going to do that with every single category. So 13 divided by 20, you should get 0.11. 17 divided by 120 gets you 0.14. 10 divided by 120 gets you 0.08. And then add them up or divide, and you're going to get 0.33. Now I go the other way. I take 40 divided by 120 to get 0.34. 32 divided by 120 to get 0.27. 48 divided by 120 to get 0.04, or you could write a 0 behind there if you wanted to. What should both my total columns add up to? What's 120 divided by 120? 1. Those should both add up to 1. Total here and here should be 1. Okay, so now I want to know what percent of students surveyed were 8th graders. Well, if I go to my 8th grade and I get 0.40. That's not a percent. How do I change it into a percent? Times it by 100. So I'm going to take 0.40 times 100, or I can just move it 2 places to the right, and I am going to get 40%. What percent of the students then were 6th graders going to the musical? What? 23%, yes. And then what percent are 7th graders not going to the musical? 14%. Very good. Okay, how do we feel about this one? Do we understand relative frequency, or are we kind of confused still that I can clarify in any way? Everybody understands it? Yes or no? Okay, then what I'm going to do is, if you need more practice, I'm going to give you the answers for 5 and see if you go ahead and find them. Actually, no, here's what I'll do. I'll give you the answers to A, B, and C, and see if you filled out this table correctly. So A should be 45%. B should be 13%. And then here it says, if there are 400 seniors total, how many would you expect to have their license and a part-time job? Well, what you would do is you would take license and a part-time job. I'm going to tell you this is 0.42. So if it asks you that, I'm going to take this relative frequency and multiply it by 400. So I have 0.42 times 400, and that's going to give me 168. So I should expect 168 students to have a part-time job and their driver's license. Okay, that is our lesson for today.